it's very easy to say anyone can write because all of us are educated, all of us are literate. We all know words, we all know letters, we all have heard stories, we read books. But I like to make the analogy of we all know what carpentry is too. We all know what saws do. We all know what hammers and nails do. We all know what wood is. But that doesn't mean that we can all make a bookcase. It's very easy to say, well, I went through school, I can write a book, I have the idea, I just sit down and I write the book. And for many people, you do that. But where craft comes in is understanding that there's a difference between knowing words and sentences and well put together words and sentences. The reading public these days is very literate. They're very, very voracious readers that read everything they can get their hands on, and they come to expect certain things. They expect, adherence to certain writing rules, to grammar, to the tropes of the genre that they're reading. An awareness of craft helps you understand that your readers have certain expectations and you need to meet them. So the best way to learn craft if you're not going to take a formal education is to read as much as you can, and to read consciously is a good way to put it. So all of us read books, all of us read newspaper articles, all of us read the ingredients on the food we eat. But if you want to be aware of what's happening to you as you're reading something, so you can try and learn the craft of how that author did it, pay attention to the things that you read, the way you feel while you read them. For instance, if you read a book and suddenly it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't put it down, go back to that book the next day and look at, why couldn't I put this down? Was it the story? Was it the fact that all of the chapters ended on a cliffhanger? Was it some other thing? Finding ways to take apart what you're already consuming is the best and lowest cost way to learn the craft of writing. Another fun way that is often very, very interesting and sometimes embarrassing is the last book that you read, go and read the Amazon reviews. Find out what people speak about, all the positive reviews. If you, as an author, get someone to read your book and they enjoyed it enough that they want to tell other people, they're evangelizing for you and your work. There are going to be things about your book or that book that they loved. So when that happens for another author, pay attention to the things that other people say about those books and then see if you can apply the knowledge you take from there to your own writing. So if you need a little more structure, if you've done the easy stuff and you want a little more structure, then the next step is to probably look for a group of other writers near you, whether that's near you online in some kind of online writing workshop or near you in geography, a local writing group. Most of the people who come to a writing group have already made the realization that they want their craft to be a little bit better. They want help understanding what is not working in the chapter or the story or the book that I'm writing. And having a peer or someone else who's also trying to answer those same questions, someone else who's also trying to say, something's not right in my own writing. Let's compare notes and see what we can do to help help each other out is also very useful.
The first thing I ever wrote, it was in the early 80s, I sat down and so I'm a scientist. My field is laser physics, and I never had any training as a writer other than writing technical papers or trade journal, articles and things like that. But I wanted to write fiction, and I sat down and I wrote a 250,000 word novel. And I remember I kind of put it away while I started preparing all the stuff I needed to go with it to submit it to a publisher. Query letter, a synopsis, things like that. And about a month after I had finished it and put it away, I pulled it out and just thought I'd proofread it one more time. And it was just absolutely terrible. It was just atrocious. I was ashamed that I'd put those words on paper, and nobody's ever seen that novel. I kept it around for about 10 years, but then I finally threw it out. It was terrible. So, I guess the flip side of that is that if you're going to let that discourage you, you better not be a writer. And so I was lucky enough to not be discouraged by that, and I just sat down and wrote the next one, which was a little bit better, but not terribly good. And I kept writing like that and kept going at it.
First of all, you have to read. You have to read good writers, pay attention to their tricks of the trade. How do they plot? How do they organize? How do they structure? Are they doing the traditional 3-act structure? I sometimes recommend that a young writer, or it doesn't matter, it could be a middle-aged writer, take a favorite book, read it again, and when you read it this kind of third time, outline it, or as I call it, reverse outline it. So you're paying attention to where the acts end, and again, what are the tricks of the trade? What are the character arcs that the writers created for the hero and the villain, if we're talking about traditional commercial fiction? So you can really learn from the best, not by copying the style, not by copying plots, but understanding structure, dialogue, plotting, and then creating your own characters, your own plot, your own character arcs. I'd say start with reality. In other words, make your characters real. Put your characters in situations that are credible. You want to adhere as close as possible to reality, both in the situations and in the characters, and you put your hero, your protagonist, in a jam. You make it real tough for your hero so that the reader will root for the hero. And at the same time with the villain, no twirling of mustaches, no wearing the black hat and wearing the white hat. You have to create some empathy for the villain also. People are not made up of all good or all evil, and that comes back to the main point of adhering to reality.
The thing that I can point to the most is just being more confident and more assured about my writing. As a first-time author, when I wrote my first book, I was nervous and terrified, and I think every author probably approaches it that way because it's such a personal endeavor to write. But as you write more and more books, you become more and more comfortable with your process, with outlining, with allowing the characters to tell the story or letting the plot unfold. So I think just for me personally, it's just been a great journey of experience and learning and growth and trusting myself in what I'm doing.
I wrote about in my book this idea of a learning disposition, and the concept is that you're always learning, and the minute you stop, you're stale. You can't barely keep up with everything going on in the news, let alone in your particular industry that you're writing about or your particular field of interest that you're writing about. It makes it very difficult the minute you stop. So you have to stay forever current. I like to teach. I think you learn best when you teach. It's a completely selfish endeavor to teach because I get to be a student in the process of preparing to teach. And it requires you to be very introspective and to keep tabs on what's going on so that you're not stale. You don't want to present yesterday's news in a current events class, right? It needs to be today's news. So I think that's one way is to teach. Another way is to speak about your material a lot. Keeps you on your toes. But staying in that learning disposition is just a critical element. What would you do if you stopped learning? How would you manage that? It would just be maddening without it.